a walleye that's 4 inches long, is that this year's or last year's? Last year's.
This year's, they're like maybe an inch now, inch and a half probably.
Oh wow.
They're teeny tiny.
Okay.
Once they hit like 2.5, 3, that's when they really start to like put the weight on and start to grow like lengthwise pretty good too. But
so it's funny that we see you today. So we were just talking a little while ago. Tell us more about this number that supposedly that we always hear, this 1 million adult walleyes in this lake.
Yep. So those are.
What is considered by the state an adult walleye?
So sexually mature, I want to say it's 3 years old.
Okay.
So they can be anywhere from 10 to 15 inches. You know, just depending on how much they're eating, and just that fish's genetic makeup. Because you know, if it has really big parents, that fish has a really good chance of becoming a 23, 24 incher. You know. But
and so the hatchery influence genetically, it doesn't that,
well,
I don't want to say mix up the gene pool, but doesn't it level things out because it's community based?
A little bit.
Okay.
So like just with anything that spawns in a stream, you're gonna get some mixing.
Right.
Not as much as you get when you get 5 females to 1 male in a hatchery.
Right.
Then you're getting a really big distribution of the ratio of how many males to females per canister of eggs. But yeah, like in the wild, 1 male spawning might fertilize 2, 3 females egg lays, you know, versus the 5 that we get in the hatchery. So, yeah, it depends on the ratio of males to females in whatever water body they're spawning in. But yeah, the hatchery does give us better odds of getting some bigger fish, and then just a higher success rate of when the eggs
overall.
Exactly.
So the question is, you were saying, you know, they become mature like around 3, and the size varies of maybe what they eat.
Yes.
So a 3-year-old could be 8 inches, or a 3-year-old can be 11 inches, depending on this, like what they eat.
Sure, yeah. So like the last couple of years, we didn't have the really big shad numbers, and that definitely played a bit of an influence on last year's fish that were getting to that 15-inch size. So that's why we're seeing so many like 13, 14, 12-inch fish. Just because those shad, that, like I was saying the last time we talked, they're pretty much all fat to a walleye.
Right. Now, so how is this year's shad looking already?
It's looking pretty good. I haven't gone out shocking yet. That's usually when we see them the most, just at night, because we're in real shallow. But the people that have gone out, they've been saying it's just thick. During the day, they like, especially down at this end of the lake, they get right down into the weeds and they stay there.
Okay.
Yeah, they look for that cover, and then at night they come to the top of the weed beds and start feeding for the most part.
I caught one out here.
Oh, a shad?
I caught an adult.
Nice.
It was 15 inches long.
They smoke real good.
You know, it's funny, I put them back.
Yeah. We have one guy that keeps them every once in a while, and he smokes them, and they turn out pretty darn good. So I would suggest it next time you get one.
It's the first time in my life I've caught one. You and I talked about it the last time we met, and I'd never, and it waffled a jigging wrap. Like, it wasn't foul hooked. That back, you know, tail of it was in his mouth, like this, and I set the hook, and it was all over the place. I'm like, what the hell is this? You know?
They're squirrely fish. Like when we get them in a net, they're not fun to deal with because they're a really weird shape.
And their body comes down at the bottom to a point, like it's a mitered cut, and it was sharp.
Yeah, there's little tiny spikes back there.
Ooh.
So if you're not careful and you're trying to pull them out of something, they'll slice your finger right open.
As soon as I picked it up, it was on the finger side of my gloves, and I'm like, oh, that's a little weird, because it was dug right in.
They're sharp little fish, and yeah, I mean, we have the gizzards out west in like Minnesota. They have a commercial fishery for American shad,
Yeah.
These guys aren't quite as good, but if people catch them,
These ones are American
these
or
are
gizzard?
gizzard.
They
These are gizzard.
only.
gizzards.
Okay.
Not quite
Interesting.
as good, but still pretty tasty. So tell people to keep them. They're a fun fish to experiment with, you know.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
So what's on tap for Cornell in the next, between now and ISA? Like,
So,
what do you guys focus on?
Right now, we're looking to recapture as many of those walleye that we clipped at the hatchery as possible. So that's what we're doing the shocking for. So we can catch as many of those clipped fish as we can, stick a tube down their throat, see what they're eating, toss them back.
So I was wondering, you know, we catch the fish that have the fins clipped.
Yep.
Is that how, and I've kept a log of how many I've done this year, is that how you guys estimate the amount of walleye in the lake, by what you net in?
Yep.
By the, okay.
Yep, so we clipped an exact number. So this year it was 20,000 fish split. We try to get it as 50-50 male and female as possible. And then this time of year, while we're recapturing, then we're looking for the proportion of clipped to unclipped fish that we get back. And that gives us our population estimate. So if we're getting 1 clipped fish for every 10 unclipped, and we catch half of our clipped fish back, we know that we got 1/10 of the population in this lake.
Do you always clip the same fin every, or does that give you year class by doing?
Yeah, so we rotate it
Oh,
year
cool.
to
That's
year.
what I was wondering.
We rotate
Very
it
cool.
year to year. So we get fish back in the hatchery that have a little nubbin growing
And they
back,
grow back,
and we
okay.
can tell that was a fish that we clipped during the last population estimate, or 2 before it, you know.
Very cool.
And
Yep.
fin clipping is something in the salmonoid world that have been doing forever. You know, on the
Yeah.
West Coast, and then here now at Altmar, to denote wild to hatchery, and
Exactly.
and it
Yep.
used to be in a lot of places on the West Coast, it's all its fins, it's got to be returned immediately.
Yep, and that it's just the easiest, quickest visual thing for anybody in fisheries to identify a fish that they're working at. Like, we do tag walleye every once in a while, but that's usually for some special grant or a grad student's project or something like that. And those fish, we're getting readings back and stuff like that. We're not trying to go and recapture that specific fish,
Gotcha.
because one tag walleye is impossible to find in a school of 100, you know,
Sure.
versus
Sure.
a clipped fish. If you catch 100 fish, you can see it right there. So yeah, it's a visual thing that just makes things quick and easy for everybody who's processing samples and stuff like that.
It's funny, this spring we caught a lot of
Yeah.
freshly clipped fish.
Yep.
And now that I think about it, I don't know that I've had one in a while, and they would certainly be healed over by now, because I mean,
Oh,
you
yeah.
could see them in May where they were still raw.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
nice,
for lack of a
clean
better
cut.
term.
Yep,
Yeah.
Yep. Now they're starting to round up a little more. And they do grow back a little bit. So sometimes we clip a half fin, sometimes it's full fin. And you can see right where we clipped it after
Yeah,
it's been
yeah.
a couple of years or whatever.
Yeah. That's interesting. So this year, start to finish, has been a little out of the norm, let's say. You know, we
Yep.
never had water temps. I never saw water temps in the 80s.
Correct.
I never saw on this end an algae bloom. I never saw a mayfly hatch elongate that long.
Yep.
So a lot of I've never seen a year where there's been this much east wind.
Yep.
And big east wind, especially early in the year. So I mean, there's a lot of things that, for guys that have spent a lot of time on this lake, like this year was a little different.
Yeah.
And I still think the fishing's been really good.
It has. It has. I finished up my August data at the beginning of September, and we had almost 100,000 walleye that had been caught all summer long up to that point, which is crazy high. But still, people are struggling to get a limit, so you don't know if it's just there's more people fishing, or you know, it's a lot of fish but not a lot of limits. So
In the guide world in the old days, we always would say that 10% of the fishermen catch 90% of the fish.
Exactly.
And I think that's always going to be true. Have you seen, so we just talked about this 5 fish limit this year. Do we think that the state has accomplished what they wanted, and are you seeing an increase of limit catches more than normal?
I'm not seeing an increase in limit catches. I'm seeing a lot of people that are getting like 4 fish and then they're calling it for the day, you know.
Right.
That being said, there are plenty of people getting limits, just not a whole lot of them. I think everybody is pretty happy with the number of fish that are getting caught at the state level and our level too.
And you just talked about how, you know, that 15-16 incher is keeping the 12-13 inchers from reaching that potential earlier.
Yeah.
Do we think that there's going to be a change in the perch number coming up, and maybe go back to either unlimited or a higher than 50 fish per person limit? Because I'm going to tell you that perch that's 6 inches or less is everywhere in this lake, and they don't leave you alone.
No,
they don't leave you alone.
They
and
do not.
So theoretically, if you got those bigger ones out, then you know.
Yeah, I could see them changing the perch limit again, but for at least a few years, I think it'll stay where it's at.
Okay.
I mean, I had my first boat yesterday where 2 guys, between them, they had 30 perch. That was the first time I've had it this year. Granted, it is definitely perch season now.
Yeah.
So that's just going to keep going up. But yeah, the yellow perch in this lake, they just do terrifically. It's built for them.
Yeah.
And they are hands down the most successful species in this lake.
Yeah.
Like, by far. So I don't think we're going to see anything crazy with their population going up or down as far as like with walleye numbers affecting them. Same with anglers. I think that with the number of people that are going to be keeping a limit, I think it's just going to be a drop in the pond for their population.
Yeah, because I mean, if you looked at the total mass of fish in this lake, I would assume if you made a pie chart, the yellow perch has to be the largest segment by far in total population.
Especially as far as sport fish go, for
sure. And because what else would even be close?
Yeah.
I mean,
the next closest thing would probably be walleye or white perch.
Okay.
And
oh, there's that many whites?
There's a lot of them, but not as many as the yellows. Like there's quite a big difference between their populations. There's still a lot of them.
Like Midwest, people live and die by those whites. You know, they love them. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But
yeah,
haven't caught one this year. I
caught one early, back in May. But you know, and maybe that's just more of a location thing. I know that they're more of a deeper pelagic open water fish.
East End, they catch a lot of them.
Yeah,
especially like South Bay and then the drop off on the North Shore. They get a lot of white perch over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the yellows are the king of the lake for real.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah. And scientifically, has it ever been proven that hook and line have really affected a fish population as opposed to commercial setting? Like, I've always been told that you can't really affect a population with hook and line.
Yeah, so hook and line in a negative sense hasn't. In a positive sense, hook and line has done a great job for commercial tuna fisheries.
Okay.
Because they can change their bait size to target specific sized fish.
Yeah.
So in freshwater fisheries, hook and line is just, all right, there he goes, so long. It's not going to make a huge dent in a population unless you have like a 300 boat fleet coming out to
daily
the lake or something
every day. Yeah.
But nowadays that's just it's not going to happen. You know?
Yeah. And that's very akin to what I've always been told. You know. That's interesting. Interesting, and something that we all have to keep in mind. You know, you see a lot of guys from now until ice up if they're fortunate, oh, I got my 50 perch today, and then you'll hear other people go, oh, what do you need all those fish for? Ah, you're going to hurt the population. You're not.
You're not. You're not.
You're not.
Yeah.
I mean, period. You're not.
Yeah.
In the state has set limits that are within their guidelines, and I'm sure the math is such that they're figuring on the high end. If every angler within a 3-hour radius came and you did the averages, that those 50 perch,
exactly,
you could be a guy that's out here every day taking his 50 for the next month and a half.
Yep, exactly. They set the regulations theorizing that every person that hits the lake is going to keep a limit of that fish every day.
Yes.
So that's what they plan. They plan for the highest take feasible,
knowing full well that it will be a fraction of that.
Exactly.
Whether it be time, circumstance, commitment, whatever.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. Like this boat's only looking for 3 fish. This guy's looking for a limit. This guy's only doing catch and release. They take that all out and they say everybody's keeping a limit, and that's how they
can we support it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great. We're gonna end on that, Jake. That's great information.
Wonderful.
And I'll tell you, everybody, from me to you, everybody loves these conversations.
Awesome.
And I love being able to bring actual factual information and get away from the I feel likes in life and talk about and our factual is still not 100% because there is no fisheries data that is unequivocally correct. It's all estimation. You know, and it's wonderful to be able to talk to you, and I hope that Cornell and the state are happy with you being that kind of voice, because this has really worked, and this is what, our 3rd or 4th video that's going to be now?
Like that, probably, yeah.
And I mean, they all get extremely well received.
Awesome.
So
happy to hear it.
Thanks, brother.
By the way, my name is Don.
Jake.